A lot of the time when new cards and sets are released in TCGs, there is often a series of cards that immediately find their way into the meta. This isn't a new thing, but very few times do these cards completely overshadow the current decks of the format and suddenly take over everything on the first day. One of these decks was Palkia V, released back in Astral Radiance. At that time, the current meta was composed mainly of Mew V, Arceus V, and Ice Rider V. Other decks such as Blissey V, Vikavolt V, and Rapid Strike were also doing pretty well, but as soon as Astral Radiance was released, Palkia V completely overtook the game. Its ability to hit huge damage if both players committed lots of benched Pokemon, plus its Vstar power could recycle free water energy from the discard, not to mention the plethora of supporters, item cards, and other water Pokemon it had at its disposal, the deck's best partners being the Inteleon line as well as Radiant Greninja. Drizzile and Inteleon's Shady Dealings abilities letting you grab any item cards from your deck, and Greninja could get energy into the discard for Palkia V to recycle back with its V-Star power, and its attack could also snipe benched Pokemon. The deck did very well, but as the months went on and as we went into the Scarlet and Violet era, the deck slowly began to fade away. Lugia V quickly took over alongside Lost Box, and now in 2024, Charizard is the deck to beat. The deck that power crept the format had been power crept itself. However, with the release of Stellar Crown, Palkia has been making its way back into the game for one final hurrah before it rotates out of the format next year. But before we get into the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, as your support really does help out this channel. So why exactly is this card seeing a sudden resurgence in Japan? Well, it's all because of a brand new stadium card, that being Area Zero Under Depths, which reads, each player who has a Terra Pokemon in play can have up to 8 benched Pokemon. Now immediately you may be thinking, how does this card work with Palkia, since it's a V Pokemon and not a Terra Pokemon? Well, deck lists have started to include different Terra Pokemon in order to make the effect active. The most common ones being Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX, which is able to snipe benched Pokemon with its attack, as well as having another attack that can lock your opponent's active Pokemon. And the other more common partner is Terrapagos EX, which has a very similar attack to that of Palkia, dealing more damage based on the amount of benched Pokemon you have in play. The deck has also been including the new Noctowl line with Fan Rotom in order to grab any 2 trainer cards from your deck, just like how they used to play the Inteleon cards. So with a Terra Pokemon in play, that player can now have 8 benched Pokemon. Palkia's attack Subspace Swell does 60 damage plus 20 more damage for each benched Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's. So previously, if both of you and your opponent had a full bench, Palkia could hit for a huge 260 damage. While it wasn't enough to one-hit KO V-Star and V-Max Pokemon, it was still a lot of damage. Obviously this attack is kind of reliant on your opponent, as they could just choose not to bench that many Pokemon, which will lower your damage. However, that just means your opponent won't be getting the full value out of their board, since they might need to bench a certain Pokemon to help power up their board or grab certain cards, neglecting to bench any V or EX Pokemon that Palkia can easily one-hit KO. Now with Area Zero Under Depths, both players can have 8 benched Pokemon if they have a Terra Pokemon in play, and given that most decks in the format play Terra Pokemon, they will have access to a bigger bench. Even if they don't play into it, you could just flood your own bench and bring Palkia's damage numbers higher than they could ever reach previously. If both players have 8 benched Pokemon, Palkia can hit for 380 damage, which will one-hit KO literally anything in the game. Even with just your own 8 benched Pokemon, that's 220 damage. So if your opponent has been neglecting to bench any Pokemon and say they only have 3, that's an extra 60 for 280, which is enough to KO V-Star Pokemon. And if it doesn't, Radiant Greninja or Wellspring Mask can easily finish off those Pokemon, while also KOing other Pokemon at the same time. This deck is not only aggressive but very fast. It can easily get its ideal board set up and ready to go as soon as the second turn. This deck also puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. They don't want to bench anything, but they have to in order to play. They might need to bench a Rotom V or a Fezandipiti EX to draw some cards. They might need to bench a Luminion to grab a supporter card. Maybe they were slow in setting up a Pidgeot EX or Noctowl, so now they need to bench the weak pre-evolutions that are just sitting ducks for the deck's variety of attackers. Not to mention the deck also has a stall option with Wellspring Mask Ogerpon, so if you yourself are slow in building up the board, you could just stall your opponent for a few turns by locking a useless Pokemon in the active spot, while also doing little bits of chip damage at the same time. Water continues to prove itself as one of the best types in Pokemon. Not just the TCG, but also in the video games. Even though Palkia doesn't have the huge plethora of support it had upon release, it still has some very powerful cards at its disposal. It's always nice to see old decks take the spotlight again, even if it's only for a couple of months. There is always the chance that Palkia could become even stronger towards the end of the year depending on what cards we see in our final few sets of 2024. Plus, Stellar Miracle has only been legal in Japan for a couple of weeks, so players will be continuing to test and theorise what the best cards are to play alongside Palkia for quite a while. Palkia, when it was released in 2022, started off with a huge bang, a bang that over time slowly started to dwindle away, but that light has the chance to shine one last time before it eventually fades away forever.